Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingracia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I'm really glad you could be with me today. And if you've been listening for the past several episodes, you know that I've been going through session 26 of the Power of Purity conference, which is entitled, Why You've Struggled So Much with Sex. And you know, so many guys struggle with the issue of sex, especially Christian guys. I struggled for many, many years in my Christian life, and I didn't understand why sex held so much power over me and why I seemed so powerless in my ability to resist sexual temptation. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Well, this session is designed to help a guy, as the title says, to understand why you've struggled so much with sex. And we've learned that all these ingredients get put into a young boy's life, and then the young boy grows into a man, and this stuff follows him into life, right? The cake that comes out of the oven is predicated upon the ingredients that got put into the cake before it went into the oven. And then I've identified these kind of 10 steps that I think are a kind of template that apply to so many men's lives and situations. And it's these 10 steps that begin to unfold in most guys' lives. And the 10 steps are the discovery of his penis, masturbation, ejaculation, and orgasm. Number 2 is repetition. When he discovers this, he quickly learns he can repeat this experience over and over again. This leads to step 3, which is a habit. A habit becomes established in his life. This leads to step 4, which is a sexual rhythm, which is kind of the relationship that he enters into with his own body, where he's learning his body and the rhythm, the regularity at which he wants to experience an orgasm. This leads to the establishment of the sexual appetite, which is growing and becoming more powerful. And we learn that people learn the language of their own body. And your body tells you when it's hungry, when it's tired, when it is full, when it wants you to stop eating, or when it's thirsty. And in much the same way, I believe the sexual appetite is the strongest, if not one of the strongest, if not the strongest appetite. And your body tells you. And we learn to feed the sexual appetite in the same way we feed our physical appetite for food. Step number 6, then, is fantasy. And this concerns the movement of our sexual self and sexual energy from our body into our mind, you see. So now my sexual self isn't just about who and what I'm doing with my body, but what's going on in my mind, what I'm thinking about, and the fantasy that comes to bear in my life, my heart. This leads to step 7, which is compulsion. Compulsion concerns the idea that now I'm being compelled. I am no longer controlling sex. Sex is controlling me, and I'm being compelled to do these things, often in violation of my own conscience. This leads to step 8, which is self-medication. It speaks of when a man is beginning to use sex and his orgasm as a way to self-medicate in the attempt to essentially escape pain, confusion, disorientation in his life. And I believe that the orgasm becomes the drug of choice for many men. I have no doubt that for many years, my orgasm was my drug. I was never an alcoholic. I was never a drug addict. But I think this concerns the concept of sex addiction. You see, it's the drug of choice that many men turn to. This leads then to step 9, which is acting out. You see, as all this is escalating in a man's heart and life and soul, inevitably he begins to act out, right? in different ways. And how do men act out? In all kinds of ways, using prostitutes, going to strip clubs, looking at pornography, compulsive masturbation, adulterous affairs, homosexual activity, Craigslist, all of the above, and much, much more. And finally, step 10 is addiction. And we learned that Webster's defines addiction as a person who devotes or surrenders themselves to something habitually or obsessively. And I said that my simple kindergarten definition is that when something controls me instead of me controlling it. Well, we've covered the 10 steps, and what I wanted to do today, you guys, is just share a few observations concerning these 10 steps. These 10 steps that are common in the life of so many men, and they come about, I believe, in response to the natural result and outgrowth of the many ungodly and unholy ingredients that are stirred into the mix of a man's early sexual development. The 10 steps that I just mentioned: discovery, repetition, habit, sexual rhythm, sexual appetite, fantasy, compulsion, self-medication, acting out, and addiction. And so what I'd like to do is just share with you guys a couple observations now about these 10 steps. The first one is this. I don't necessarily think they're sequential, but that all 10 of these steps can be happening together in a man's life, all at the same time. In other words, it's not a neat, clean, tidy process where a man transitions through these 10 steps one at a time. You complete step 2, so now you go to step 3. You complete step 3, so now you go to step 4. You complete step 4, so now you go to step 5. It's not like that, you see. In fact, I'd advocate that the process is something more like building blocks, where these steps are literally building upon one another. So it's not that any of them ever go away. They're always there, but we're building new ones on top all the time, you see, so that the advance or introduction of the next step doesn't eliminate the previous step, but in fact builds upon it, so these various steps then coexist together at the same time. And what this means is that a man can eventually have all 10 steps alive and powerful and functioning and interacting and interrelating all at the same time. Just like the cake metaphor, you guys, right? When you make the cake, you mix the ingredients together, and they're all mixed up all together, all at the same time, you see? And it's this mix that contributes to the cake, the final product that comes out of the oven. And so as a result, many men end up with all of these various sexual energies and motivations swirling around in their soul and their life and their sexuality all at the same time. So there's repetition happening, right? And there's habit, and there's a sexual rhythm, and there's sexual appetite that he's feeding, and he's being compelled, and he's self-medicating, and he's acting out, and he's an addict, all at the same time. All this stuff is going on. My second observation concerns the concept of escalation, if you will. Notice that throughout the process, there's a kind of escalation as a man's sexual self, where sex essentially is holding more power, more and more and more and more power in his soul and his life. See, where he's controlling sex less and less, and sex is controlling him more and more. It's through this process that a man's sexual self is becoming larger than him, in a sense. It's becoming bigger and more powerful in his life and soul than it was ever supposed to be. See, sex is becoming something dysfunctional, inappropriate, disproportionate, too powerful. You see, something that God never intended it to be. And this leads to my third observation, which is this. I believe that it's these 10 steps and this kind of escalation that essentially sets up many men, if not most men, for failure in their marriages. And I'm talking about sexual failure in their marriages. I'd advocate that because of this overall process, it inevitably sets a man up for sexual failure in the context of his marriage. Let me try to explain. As we know and understand, and as you stay tuned to this Power of Purity podcast, if you access the Power of Purity conference, I believe, I teach, and I think I can support biblically the concept that God's design, will, and plan is that a man's sexual gift should belong to his wife only. It should be expressed in the context of his marriage with his wife, or what I call wife-size sex, which, by the way, is session 11 in the Power of Purity conference, wife-size sex. Or said another way, a man's body belongs to his wife. His sexuality belongs to his wife. His penis belongs to his wife. His orgasm belongs to his wife. And his wife should be the sole focus and attention of his sexual desire and expression. That means that the only time I open my sexual gift is with my wife, to share it with my wife, you see. And inevitably, this leads to a big problem for many men when they get married, you see, because way before they even met their wife, all this stuff was happening to them. The ingredients were getting put into their sexual cake, and the escalation of the 10 steps was happening, and all these powers exist in their soul, you see, even before they get married. It's as if the size of their sexual self is already expanded and enlarged bigger than them because of the process of the 10 stages that we've been talking about. So as a result, when he gets married, almost without exception, his sexual self and his sexual desire are way bigger than they're supposed to be, than they were ever intended to be. Sex holds more power and inappropriate and dysfunctional power in his life and soul than it was ever supposed to be, you see. So this leads to an inevitable tension in this man's life and soul and marriage because his wife is simply incapable of providing for him and satisfying the high level of sexual activity and orgasm that he's trained himself into, that he's become accustomed to over the years. You see, through the development of his habit, his sexual rhythm, the sexual appetite, and the addiction, and all these things that come to exist inside of him. And as a result, this tension leads quite naturally to his inevitable failure in the context of his marriage. And so this manifests itself in at least several very predictable outcomes, which could include any of the following expressions. I have this concept that I think is really important, you guys. I don't know if I've talked about it to this point in the podcast or not, but I call it stealing orgasms, okay? For most men, since they want and they need more orgasms than their wife can provide to them, and they want and need, and they're accustomed to way more orgasms than their wife is willing to provide for them, they essentially begin to what I call steal orgasms, which means they basically are going to get as many orgasms from their wife as they can get, right? But then they proceed to steal additional orgasms, or what I call bonus orgasms. I also call it double dipping, okay? Because they're getting orgasms from their wife, and now they're going out to get these extracurricular orgasms because of who they are as a sexual person. It's like their sexual self simply will not fit into the context of their wife and their marriage. So this man is set up like for failure. we understand that God's will and design is that I limit the expression of my sexual gift to my wife only. But you see, wife-size sex, that's God's plan. But the problem is my sexual self is way too big for my wife. So therefore, this man almost inevitably begins to go out and steal orgasms. And of course, there's many different ways to steal orgasms, right? And although many men resort to different ways of doing this, suffice to say, for our purpose right here, internet pornography and masturbation is like a default mechanism for many men. So you see, in order to serve my sexual self, my sexual appetite, in order to feed my body what it needs and what I've come accustomed to, I need my wife, but she ain't enough. I need internet pornography and I need masturbation, at least, you see. And another expression of this sexual failure, number one, is stealing orgasms, okay? The next one is the concept of duplicity, okay? The stealing of orgasms inevitably makes this man a duplicitous man, because more often than not, his wife doesn't know what he's doing to get these bonus orgasms. She doesn't know that he's stealing orgasms, you see. So as a result, he's essentially representing himself to be one sexual man to his wife, when in fact he's a very different sexual man than the one he's allowing his wife to believe that he is. You see, she thinks she's married to a certain man. ABC. My husband is ABC, when in fact he's XYZ. This means that he's now two different men. Thus the concept of duplicity. He's the man that he really is, and he's the man that his wife thinks he is. And along with its duplicity come at least a couple other issues that are complementary. One is keeping secrets, because the man now has these secret and clandestine activities going on in his life, right? He's stealing orgasms. He's getting bonus orgasms. He's looking at porn. He's masturbating. He's going on Craigslist. He's having sexualized chats with other people. Maybe he goes to strip clubs on occasion. Maybe he's using prostitutes. God only knows, but whatever he's doing to get his bonus orgasms, it's making him a man of duplicity. And now he has secrets that nobody knows about. He has secrets that he's keeping from his wife. And this means that there are now parts of his life that his wife doesn't know about, and these issues are secrets. And what this means now, the next step is that he's living a lie. Because the man has this duplicity, he has these secrets in his life. He's representing himself to be one man to his wife, when in fact he's a very different man than the man he's representing himself to be. So now, very sadly, he's in the position where he's essentially living a lie within the context of the most important relationship of his wife. He's representing himself. He's letting his wife believe that he's a particular man, but he's got these secrets, and he's living a lie. 1 John chapter 1, verse 6 says, "If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth." A couple observations from this scripture. Notice the connection between what you're claiming and the lie. You see, it says, if we claim to have fellowship with Jesus, but we're really walking in the darkness, then you're lying. You're living a lie, and you're not living the truth. So you see, there's a connection between what you're claiming to be, what you're representing yourself to be, versus who you really are. And the conclusion is that means that you're a liar. You're living a lie. In other words, you're not who you're representing yourself to be. And when you're living a lie, guess what, guys? It leads quite naturally to the next dynamic, which I call the cover-up, okay? And this is just, isn't this so common to so many of our lives, you guys, Christian guys, that we're doing this, right? We're stealing orgasms. So now I'm becoming a man of duplicity. I'm keeping secrets. I'm living a lie. And it inevitably leads to what I call the cover-up. So as all these issues are creating this kind of endless cycle in a man's life over a period of months and then years, maybe he's doing this, he inevitably is now living a cover-up. Essentially, the man never really intended, deliberately, intentionally, to perpetrate these offenses against his wife. It's not as if he had malice in his heart. He's simply living out the reality of who he is. You see, who he became in that metamorphosis from the young boy way back when he had all those ingredients stirred into his sexual development, which led to the escalation of those 10 steps that we reviewed and have now contributed to the sexual man that he is today. He's just living out his life, who he is as a sexual person. But it doesn't fit in his marriage, you see, so it's a big problem. And as the reality of these dynamics in his life and his marriage accumulate over time, this man has an intuitive sense, I'll really be in big trouble if I ever get caught. Because now he has all these secrets and he's been living this lie for a prolonged period of time. I mean, to get caught and to have to admit to your wife that you've looked at porn and masturbated one time, or maybe a couple times, that's one thing, right? But to have to admit to her that you've been doing this for years, probably ever since you got married, you've been doing this, it's quite another thing. And to admit the true extent of your use of porn or your use of Craigslist or the fact that you've been dressing up in your wife's undergarments, it's virtually impossible to do for most guys. Therefore, as time's going by, there's like this growing accumulation of guilt, you see, an accumulation of behavior and guilt and shame, and there's an ever-increasing pressure on the man to not get caught. Because if I got caught with a little pile, I'd be in trouble, but this pile is huge. So as this accumulation occurs, there's a growing pressure on him. Now I really can't get caught. So the cover-up gets deeper, you see. And so now he's living in the status of this perpetual cover-up as he seeks to keep his secret life and self and duplicity the secret that he needs it to be, because God forbid if anybody found out who I really am and what I'm really doing, you see. And by the way, I'm going to throw this in for free. This is often why women are so deeply and profoundly hurt and offended and feeling betrayed when and if they eventually discover their husband's sexual secrets, because they in fact realize that their husband has been living a lie to them, presenting himself to be a different man than the man he really is. And this inevitably creates a massive insecurity in many women, because they then feel that they don't even know the man that they're married to. Oh my God, I don't even know who you are. I've seen this over and over again, that women are hurt more by the lie that their husband has been living than the actual sexual offenses themselves, you see. So all of this is bad news, guys, right? It's all bad news. And as I work toward the conclusion of this episode and the conclusion of this particular session, understanding why you've struggled so much with sex, I want to conclude with 3 steps of freedom, okay? If the reality of these 10 steps are alive and powerful and at work in a man's heart and life, what does he do? Where can he go? How does he break the old cycle and the old power of these 10 steps to find true freedom and true healing and true redemption? Well, it's not an easy answer, guys. It's more often than not a complex answer. And I might suggest that's the purpose of the Power of Purity Conference and why I have 30 sessions, because I'm speaking to all kinds of different aspects and angles of this thing. But for our purpose here in conclusion of this session, I want to share briefly 3 steps to freedom. And the first one is this. You have to admit to yourself that you have a problem. Okay? Admit that these 10 steps are alive and powerful in your heart and life. You're guilty. This describes you. It's a mirror that you're looking into. You discovered your penis. You discovered repetition. It became a habit, and a sexual rhythm was established, and then a sexual appetite became powerful in your soul, and you learned to feed that appetite. And then you learned to fantasize, and you moved into compulsion where your sexual behavior was compelling you. It's controlling you instead of you controlling it. And you even learned to self-medicate through your orgasm, and you're acting out. And the reality is that you have a sexual addiction. Sex controls you. You can't control sex. And until and unless you admit that you have this problem, you can never begin the healing process. Let me just say that denial, if you think about it, guys, denial is kind of an amazing thing, isn't it? Have you ever seen denial at work in a person you know? Human beings have this profound, amazing capacity for denial. To deny something that's terribly obvious to everyone else, and yet they still deny it. Denial is a very powerful force that prevents people from seeing and admitting what is really true. As I mentioned earlier, 1 John 1:6 says, if we claim that we have fellowship with him, yet we're walking in the darkness, we lie and we do not live the truth. 1 John 1:6 says that when we claim to be one thing, and yet we're living another thing, we are living a lie and we are not living in the truth. And sometimes I don't think that we realize that the person that we're lying to the most is ourself. Isn't that an intriguing concept, that a person can lie to themselves and then believe the very lies that they're telling themselves? It happens all the time. And I might advocate that that's exactly what David was talking about in Psalm 51, which is the Psalm of repentance after he was caught in his sin with Bathsheba. Psalm 51 verse 6 says, surely you desire truth in the innermost being. I believe essentially what David is saying is, God, okay, you want me to be honest with me. You want me to be honest with myself. You desire truth on the inside of me. You desire truth in the innermost being. No more lies, no more pretending, no more candy coating, no more rationalization or minimization, no more denial, just the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Even in AA, isn't it interesting that the first of the 12 steps, what many people say, is the most important step because it begins your journey of recovery, and also what many people say is the hardest step to achieve. Step 1 is admitting to yourself that you are powerless over alcohol and that your life has become unmanageable. Isn't it interesting that the very first step of recovery and healing begins with the issue of admission? It says, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So the very first step of the healing journey concerns coming to the place where you're willing to admit some things to yourself that you have been unwilling to admit up to this point. In other words, the very gateway of recovery occurs when a person's finally able to admit to themselves that they have this problem in their life. Guys, does the shoe fit? Have you had a problem with this for years and years and years and years, and you've been living these dynamics, hiding it, duplicity, living a lie, keeping secrets, and you've been trying to represent yourself to be one person, and not really admitting to yourself that your problem is as big as it might be. So guys, step number 1 is admitting to yourself that you have a problem. Step number 2 is to realize that the solution has something to do with you and God. I would advocate that there will always be a spiritual aspect to the true solution and healing of our lives and souls, and even of our sexual selves. Again, even in AA, the second step of the 12 steps states, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. You see, the bottom line is this, you guys. God is the ultimate resource in life. God is what we are not. When we're weak, God is strength. When we're tormented, God is peace. When we're in darkness, God is light. When we're in bondage, God provides freedom. When we're surrounded by death, God is life. The fact is, if you could have helped yourself, or if you could have delivered yourself from your problem using your own resources, your strength, your wisdom, your power, your understanding, you probably would have fixed yourself a long time ago. But you didn't fix yourself because you can't fix yourself, and that's why we need God. You see, we need to acknowledge that I need a strength, a power, a wisdom, a love, a grace, a mercy outside of myself that's greater than me. Because you are not the greatest resource of your life. God is the greatest resource of your life. And the sooner that you're willing to understand that and accept that and submit to the reality of that, then the sooner your true healing and your true redemption and the healing journey of your life can begin, and your heart and your life and even your sexual self can experience redemption. And the third point I want to mention, you guys, is that we need to begin to walk the healing path that God has intended for our life. More often than not, I would advocate God's healing path will not involve an event, but better said, a process. Or said another way, God's healing path will not include a step, but steps, S, plural, steps, and that will be required to take many different steps on the redemptive pathway that God has intended for our life. This pathway will no doubt include, among many other things, many of the principles and lessons that I'm trying to present through the extended Power of Purity Conference, including such things as learning to walk in the light with yourself, others, and God, identifying, understanding, and renouncing ungodly and unholy sexual roots that were established in your life, probably as a young boy, beginning to understand the story of your life and beginning to heal from the hurt, the damage, the pain that you've suffered in this fallen world, beginning to understand how you've used sex in such an unhealthy way for your emotional equilibrium in the attempt to soothe and anesthetize the pain of your life, learning the true design and purpose of sex, and learning to shift your sexual expression from the realm of lust sex to the realm of love sex, which is a very, very important session in the Power of Purity Conference. Understanding and embracing the concept of wife-size sex and developing the battle plan that's going to enable you, by the grace of God, to begin to control sex instead of being controlled by sex. You see, it's these various initiatives and many more like them that will enable you to bring your sexual gift under the authority of God and empower you to begin to honor God with the expression of your sexual gift for the rest of your life. In conclusion, there are at least 10 common steps that many men struggle with as a result of the ungodly and unholy ingredients that got stirred into their sexual development as a young man. Step 1 is the discovery of his penis, the discovery of masturbation, orgasm, and ejaculation. Step 2 is repetition. Step 3, habit. Step 4, sexual rhythm. Step 5, sexual appetite. Step 6, fantasy. Step 7, compulsion. Step 8, self-medication. Step 9, acting out. And Step 10, addiction. And together, an understanding of these steps, guys, I pray will help you understand yourself better than you ever have before and help you along on the healing journey of your life. And together, it affirms the thesis of our session, which was this: when you understand the very unhealthy way that your sexuality developed, you'll understand why you've struggled so much with sex. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. If this has been helpful, please tell somebody about it, and I'll look forward to seeing you in our next episode. God bless you. Have an awesome and a blessed day.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.
Purity is possible with the power of purity. www.powerofpurity.org